Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me again on another artist interview series. Again, my name is Christina. I'm the gallery manager at River Arts on Water Gallery, which, due to everything going on in the world right now, is closed to the public. So this fun series is taking us behind the scenes a little bit, and we're interviewing artists that we represent at the gallery. And I'm really excited to be joined today by Rick Ross of Summit Art Studio. Hi, Rick. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. How you hanging in there?
Pretty good, pretty
Very
good.
good.
Crazy time,
Well,
but we're making it.
it's a heck of a time. I agree. Well, Rick, I'm wondering if we could start out, if you could just tell me a little bit about yourself and your artwork and your medium.
Sure. So I have been dabbling in art most of my life. I took a really long break to try to, go to school and make a living and all that kind of stuff, and realized that, yeah, probably artwork wasn't the thing that was going to pay the bills for a long time. So,
Mm-hmm.
but anyway, I found my way back, and I've worked with acrylics before and oils and watercolors and everything else, but I finally landed on oil and cold wax. The cold wax has kind of taken over my life. It's so much fun to work with. So it's my new obsession. So that's
Okay.
that's what I do most of the time now.
And now I've heard the term cold wax before, but I'm not quite sure specifically. Could you explain kind of what that means as a medium?
Sure. So I was really fascinated with encaustic work for a long time.
Okay.
But my studio, just I don't have the options to put in the ventilation and all this stuff. I have good airflow, but I know encaustic work takes a little more.
And
So I
encaustic is
started,
essentially hot wax. Is that
yeah. So you're fusing the pigments and the wax together
okay?
with heat. So um, cold wax is a nice alternative if you don't have that kind of space, and it's a little different. It gives you some different results, but
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of the way I wanted to go anyway, so it worked out
Sure.
great. So the wax itself is a mixture of wax with some sort of a solvent, and the one I use is it's mixed with odorless mineral spirits,
Okay.
so it makes it really creamy and buttery. And then what I do is I mix it together with oil paints or with dry pigments, and then I apply lots and lots of layers on either wood canvases, metal canvases, or sometimes I work in paper as well.
Okay.
But the results is just this like really highly texturized, gives you a lot, the pieces get a lot of depth. So you can, when you're doing all these layers, at some point I go back in and I scratch or I do different things to kind of bring back some of those bottom layers that I've hidden up.
Okay.
So it gives it, I don't know, it's kind of a really neat effect. So
Yeah, you're kind of adding and taking away in
yeah,
different measures. Well,
yeah, some of the
cool.
pieces will literally get hundreds of layers working back and forth, either adding or subtracting, and hopefully the end result is something I like.
Does cold wax take a really long time to like dry and harden, or does it set up pretty quickly?
It starts curing a lot faster than just traditional oil paint,
Okay.
and then you also take away some of the rules, like the fat over lean rules. So this just, you can just keep adding layers as much as you want. You don't have to worry about that. But typically, if I'm working on a piece, I can start something in the morning and come back, if it's not a really thick layer, come back in the afternoon and it'll already start being dry to the touch. So
Okay.
yeah, so I can kind of go back in as I want and play around with it. So
Okay. Interesting. Thank you. Um, I'm wondering if you can tell me, do you have any like themes or motifs that you like to explore in your artwork? Is there something that inspires you or a message you like to say?
and I think a lot of artists are like this. I really like to work based on nature. So
Oh,
a lot of my abstract work is things. Um, if you were to zoom in on something in nature, like say like rocks or uh, bark on a tree
mm-hmm.
or like rust on the side of something, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anything that has age or patina, that's what I really go for.
Okay.
I also work with some landscapes as well. And I tend to be, again, it's drawing from nature, but with my landscapes, I like to be a little more moody. So I like a lot of atmospheric stuff.
Okay.
And the cold wax really lends itself to both ways. So
Sure. Okay.
yeah, it's that layering effect, and when you see it in nature, a lot of my work tends to mimic that as well.
Okay. Is it fair to say that you're maybe fascinated by textures of things and recreating some of that?
Obsessed with textures.
Obsessed. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a really nice thing about this medium is that you can really build up a lot of texture with it. So
Yeah, and they kind of tend to almost have like a 3D surface then, right? Like if you look
yeah, they
across
really
the
do.
flat part of it.
Yeah,
Interesting. So it's sort
and
of
I
a
sometimes I'll
landscape.
mix in. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It just sort of becomes a landscape in itself. There's topography to it then. So,
Yeah, definitely. My dad for a long time, he worked as a cartographer.
oh,
So,
interesting.
and he worked with 2D and some 3D maps. This was way
Okay.
before, uh, computers were around doing all the, the computer aided
Google
drafting.
Maps.
Yeah. So he would do these by hand, and he'd also would make certain models of, I think it's topographic maps, if I remember correctly.
hmm
So I was always obsessed with how the terrain would fold and everything. So I think that's kind of how I got interested in all the textures. So
That's so interesting. I love seeing
yeah.
connections like that with different
Yeah,
people and what they end up working on. So, well, do you have any artistic heroes or anybody who you really love following what they do, or someone maybe you were learning from in school, or
sure.
anybody you can point to like that?
There, especially with his medium, there's a few artists that I really love. I actually learned how to work with cold wax from a gentleman out of Minnesota. He came down and taught a class locally, and I took it and was just blown away with it. Before that, I was trying to experiment, and everything was just not working. So I definitely needed that lesson to figure out,
Yeah.
how it worked, how to apply it properly. And he was really interesting. He his work is absolutely beautiful. His name is, and I'm going to butcher his name, and I'm so sorry, but it's James Sherbarth.
Okay.
Shebarth, I think. But yeah, wonderful artist. And he actually learned from an artist based out of Wisconsin, and her name is Rebecca Kroll.
Okay.
And she is kind of, I think people consider her sort of the guru of cold wax. So she teaches internationally. Um, Anyone who works with the medium knows her work.
Okay.
And when I was researching encaustic work and found out about cold wax, there was a lot of her pieces that kept coming up, and it's just beautiful. Again, highly textured, a lot of tons of layers. I mean, it's just everything about it is wonderful. But since then, I've found a lot of artists that are working with cold wax, and they're all wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, and I can go back through history too and find a lot of abstract artists that I love. But more recently, those are the two that really got me turned on to what I'm doing. So.
Yeah, it's interesting that kind of like you said, the guru is right here in Wisconsin. It's kind of a
Yeah,
Midwest growth movement at the moment.
yeah, definitely. And
That's so
and
cool.
she's taught so many people in the area and around the world. I mean, she's absolutely wonderful. So.
Yeah. Well, my next question then would be, in some of these other interviews, we've been speaking with artists who mention, when you look at another artist's work, and there's a balance between being energized and inspired by what they do, and then
Mhm.
also maybe feeling a sense of comparison or competition at all. Is that something that you ever have to balance with, or kind of work to balance that sense of inspiration and maybe intimidation almost
Sure.
with other artists?
I think everyone kind of goes through that. Um, you see the successes that some of them are having, and there's a little bit of envy there. But I try really hard to look at all the different artists that are working with my medium, and you can definitely see where the person who taught me that there's definitely some correlation to my work and his work.
hmm
Um, but I think as you start working in a medium, eventually you find your own voice and it takes off.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. Awesome. It's just something that we always want to try to put out there. And when I teach my students as well, is it's really easy to get intimidated and maybe like, oh man, why am I even bothering? Like to really
yeah,
just wait, have patience with yourself, give yourself the time to learn and grow and find your own voice, just like you said. So
absolutely, yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
What would you say, in your opinion, is the hardest part of being an artist? And what would maybe be the best part?
I tend to be a very quiet person,
Mhm.
so promotion, um, uh, if I do an art fair, or if I'm doing some sort of an event and I have to speak to people, that's really difficult. I
Okay.
would much rather be locked away in my room painting and doing all that stuff, which I think is a lot of what people would say. But I think that's the biggest thing, is just putting yourself out there,
Mm-hmm.
um, having your work talked about, and trying to figure out proper responses and all that kind of stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, for me, that's the most difficult part.
That's
The painting
hard,
is fun.
especially
I love that.
yeah. Like it's like the painting is why you got into doing this business, but it's almost
Exactly.
the social business part of it that can
Yeah.
be a struggle for a lot of artists.
It's really intimidating sometimes,
Yeah.
and I know people talk about this sometimes, but being at an art fair, for example, you see the people who look in your booth, and you can see their body language that they're not, it's not their thing,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes they're nice, sometimes they're not so nice, and
Right.
dealing with that is you learn quickly to have a have a tough skin. So
Yeah. Well, I'm guilty of taking everything very personally. So I don't know that I would be able to put myself out there like that. That would be a hard thing to do.
yeah, it's
And
hard.
especially maybe wanting to like explain yourself to people and maybe explain your process and um, trying to combat those maybe negative reactions, and it's hard. Those are not easy.
And that's kind of what I would consider the victory, because once in a while you run across somebody that says, I've never really been into abstract work or whatever it
Sure.
is,
Yeah.
and then you start explaining it, and if you have that moment, you'll tend to win people over a little bit. um, they might not always love it, but at least they get maybe an appreciation for it, so they're
Sure.
nicer to the next person they go and see. I don't know, but I don't know. It's hard to explain, but
Yeah.
it's fun to see that spark. Like, oh, I never looked at it that way, or I
You can
never.
like see the light bulb turning on.
Yeah. That's, yeah. You get those aha moments once in a while that are pretty cool. So.
That's fantastic. Right. And I'm wondering, have you said you kind of took a break before jumping right back into art. Was art always kind of on your mind, like even in the background during that time, or had you completely stepped away and then come back to it unexpectedly?
Um, yes. I so in high school and right into early college, and even actually when I was a really young kid, I loved everything about being creative. When I was really little, I wanted to be a cartoonist, and that was my life goal. Like, if I can just do a cartoon character and stick with it. And when I was in third or fourth grade, I developed my own cartoon character, and I would sell it to other kids in the class.
Would you really?
So I would say, like, a quarter, a nickel, whatever it was, and they would have these requests, and
Oh
you
my
know,
gosh.
I had this little dog. His name was Baxter, and I would dress him up in different clothes, draw him in different clothes or different situations. So the kids would thought that was awesome. So I would trade him for bubble gum, or rubber balls or money or whatever. And then I got the note from the teacher saying, well, it's wonderful that he's doing this and the kids really love it. He's not getting his homework done, because I'd have all these requests at night and I had to get the artwork done
You
before
gotta fill orders, right?
right,
Oh my god.
exactly. So but eventually I was really going gung-ho all through high school. I loved it. um, but then I started college and I realized that it got too much. I was working like 2 or 3 jobs to put myself through college, so the art kind of took a back seat, and
Mhm.
um, it was just hard to make time for it. And then
Sure.
and I was going for a master's degree, or going for a business degree, sorry.
Okay.
And then yeah, so it just kind of took a back seat. And then when my wife and I decided to move to Wisconsin, so we've got jobs here and we worked for a little while, and then we decided that we wanted to have a family, and that was sort of the golden opportunity. So we flipped a coin, and one of us stayed home with our kids, and that was me.
Did it really flip a
So
coin?
we literally did. Most of our decisions were made on the flip of a coin, and it's worked out pretty well. So
That's amazing.
I know, even the fact that we're in Wisconsin was sort of a coin flip. But so we did that, and I started staying home with the kids, and then we moved into a new house, and there was these giant bare walls in our house, and I said, I used to do this stuff. I was looking for artwork to put on the walls. I'm like, why can't I just make my own? And then
Sure.
it just kind of went off from there. So people started, expressing interest, and I started doing stuff for family and friends,
Hmm.
and then here I am.
That's
So yeah, it
fantastic.
worked out
That's a
great.
great
Yeah.
situation. And I know that you participate in the Mount Horeb Area Arts Association, and they do
Yeah.
the spring art tour and everything. Any updates on what's going on with them, or are they kind of waiting to see what happens? Because that's
We're
June,
trying
right?
to first week of June, and we're trying to wait. We're crossing our fingers,
Yeah,
hoping against everything that we can still do it. But yeah, I don't know yet. So
wait and see. Okay.
yeah, and that's been such a great opportunity, and I met some wonderful people and wonderful artists in that group, and um, on the tour and everything else. And
Hmm.
this year I had been working with another artist at his studio for this art tour, but this year I was going to do it on my own, and I had invited another artist to work with me here.
Okay.
So I was really excited to have it at my own place, but we'll see what happens.
Fingers crossed. I hope it works out.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
All right. Well, I thank you so much for your time. I end
Yeah,
most of these interviews by asking the same couple of questions. So I'm wondering if you would humor me with these.
sure.
When you work in your studio, would you consider yourself uh, a little bit messy and disorganized, or very neat and organized as an artist in your studio?
It is a hot mess. There is stuff everywhere. Probably every 2 or 3 months, I go in and organize it, and then by 3 days afterwards, it's back exactly the way it was. I mean, from
Okay.
supplies to finished pieces, I mean, it's just a nightmare. I feel so bad
Okay.
for my family because they tiptoe around it. They're like, and they keep saying it's fine, it's fine. I'm like, it's so bad.
I know it is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, thank you. And then finally, if you could tell me about either the best piece of advice you've ever been given, or if you have any advice for someone who may be just starting out getting into the art world.
I would say some things that I've learned and I've heard from other people is get connected quickly.
Yeah.
Join art groups because they can really help you. I'm a member of a couple of different art groups, and along with Mount Horeb Arts Association, I'm also a member of 14 South. And between those two groups, I've learned so much about marketing and education and just the whole thing.
Yeah.
And you get connected, and people will share about shows and everything else. So get connected quickly, but go for it. I mean, you're never going to know if it's going to work out unless you just go for it. And there's going to be people that are going to try to squash the dreams and all that kind of stuff. But you got to, if it's something that you love and you know that you can, that you have a path forward on it, go for it.
Awesome.